Assalamu alaikum students. I hope you all are well, safe and healthy at home. I am your course instructor Farzana Khan. Welcome to all of you in this class of literary studies. So dear students, I am here with the very important topic of medieval literature. So in this class we will talk about the literature from 1066 to 1500 century. So basically in previous class you were taught about the Old English period. In English literature the second period is medieval literature. So in this class we are going to talk about the medieval literature. By the end of today's class you will be able to understand the background of this age of English literature. You will be able to understand the important events and characteristics of medieval age, and you will be able to understand about the important writers and work of this age. So for understanding the English literature, it's very important first of all to understand the history of English literature. For this purpose there are different divisions: the Old English period and then the medieval literature and then various other ages. So you were already taught about the Old English period in the last lecture. So in this class we are going to talk about the medieval literature. So first of all, let me share with all of you the background. Basically the Norman conquest of England in 1066 was the beginning of 200 years of the domination of French in English letters. So French cultural dominance moreover was general in Europe at this time. French language and culture replaced English in politics, court, society, and had great effects on English culture. Anglo-Saxon fragmented into several dialects and gradually evolved into Middle English. You were already taught about the Anglo-Saxon period in a previous lecture. So due to the despite an admixture of French, it unquestionably English, which was prevalent at this time. So by the mid 14th century, Middle English had become the literary as well as the spoken language of England. So how this happened and how it started, let's talk about these points one by one. Basically when we talk about the medieval age, this is also called the Middle Ages, and some people or some historian also called it the Age of Chaucer. But basically it's the earlier Middle Ages in which the early age related to the other writers and other work, and after that the Chaucer came. So it has been divided, and usually according to the historians the Middle Ages or medieval age starts from 1066 to 1485, but according to some it starts from 1066 to and ends till 15th century. So in today's class we will cover this period of English literature, that what happened, what were the important characteristics, important events, important literary figures and important work of this age, which is called the medieval age. So basically first of all I would like to tell you about the Norman conquest, which basically happened in 1066. Basically Norman brought French culture into England. When we talk about the Norman conquest, keep it in your mind that Normans were the people. These were the people who first of all attacked French. They adopted the culture of the French, and after that they attacked on England. William was the Norman Duke. He was the king, he was the master of the Norman people. So under the leadership of William, they first attacked French, and then they adopted the culture of French people and the language of the French people. They were very powerful and the people of the French were weak. So when they attacked on the French, so people of French allowed them to buy the lands there. They also married with the ladies of French people, and he also learned the language of the French. So while after attacking on French, they become basically culturally rich, And after that, the William the Norman Duke attacked on England in 1066, and this battle is called the Battle of Hastings, and it is also called the Norman Conquest. So Williams defeated the Harold King of Anglo-Saxon and became the King of England. At that time in 1066, the rule was of Anglo-Saxon and the king was Harold. So William defeated the king of Anglo-Saxon, who was Harold, and William became the King of England. That's why it is called the Norman Conquest, or the William is also called the William Conqueror. So the French became the language of the court and church. But basically at that time it was the culture, and it was the principle that the official language would be the language of the king. So as William became the king, so he brought the language of French. So after becoming the after Norman conquest, basically French became the language of court and church, and Anglo-Saxon's language was Old English language, which basically was not popular because of the Norman conquest, because in the court, in everywhere, there was only the French language, which is basically called the Anglo-Norman language. But if we talk about the people, so keep it in your mind, the people of England were still using the Anglo-Saxons Old English, because the king ruled only the language, king made only the French language as the official language. So it was being used at that time in the court and the churches, but the people of England were still using the Anglo-Saxons Old language. So this period is basically called the Middle Ages, or in other sense you can say that early Middle Ages are Norman French period, because at that time the Norman conquered the England and the William became the king. That's why this period is also called the Norman French period. So it is also called the early Middle Ages. Norman, the word Norman has been basically originated, or you can say it is basically means north and man. The people basically came from north, that's why they were very strong, and they were called the Northmen Norman. So they attacked on French and became brilliant in French because they adopted the culture of the French, as I already told you. So after that they attacked on England, and then French became the official language in England. So after that, there, as I already told you, that the people of England at that time were using the Old English, which is Anglo-Saxons Old language. They were using that same language, but the official language was French. So with the passage of time, the French and the Old English, with the assimilation of both languages, Anglo-Norman language came into being. It was a new language with a mixture of French and Old Anglican language. French language which was brought by the Normans people, and English which was already there, which was used by the Anglo-Saxon period, Anglo-Saxon people. So Anglo-Norman language basically originated from the French and English. This language is also called in-between language, and later on you can say it is called the Middle English language. So this in 1066, when Norman basically conquered the England, so at that time only the French was the official language. So from 1066 till 1200, Old English had no role, because the official language was French. People were only using the old language. So it appeared in 1200 AD with the name of the Middle English language. So medieval literature is basically called the Romance literature. As in previous slides I told you that basically in 1200 AD the Middle English language appeared. How it appeared? Because the Lemans wrote Brut, which is basically the history of England. It is also called the Chronicle of Britain, and it is the first history of England. So he has written his book in Old English. So from 12th century with the work of layman's 1200th century with the work of the layman's brute, basically the Old English started and appeared, and after that people started to write work in this language. And after that, Anglo-Saxon first book written in English and development in English language started from here. Basically, medieval age has been divided by the historian into three ages. First age is Anglo-Norman period, which starts from 1066 to 1340. And after that, age of Chaucer, 1340 to 1400. And after that, Barren period from 1400 to 1485. Anglo-Norman period is basically the period which starts from the conquest of England with the Norman conquest from 1066 until 1340s. And after that, the age of Chaucer, when the Chaucer started the work from 1340 to 1400. And Barren period is basically the period in which there was no proper literary development, because mostly the people basically copied the work of the Chaucer. So when we talk about the Anglo-Norman literature, as in other sense you can say the early medieval literature is basically as I already told you that the Normans brought the French culture and French language to England. So they basically brought love, chivalry and religion, these themes here for literature. They basically brought romance literature. Here romance doesn't mean the love for the opposite gender. Here romance love basically means love for the country. So one of the famous works of that time is the Ormulum, which was written by Orm, and according to some historian this work is basically anonymous. And usually work was written in praise of King Arthur and his knights. At that time they were used to write work in praise of king and the knights. And other important work of this time is All and the Nightingale. Cursor Mundi is again an anonymous work, and Cleanness and Patience is again an other Anglo-Norman literature and anonymous, because at that time there were no printing, and usually the writers were used to write, and every text was available at that time in written form. So there was no proper rule of writing the name of the author. That's why we call it anonymous work. So let's talk about the educational development of the medieval age. Basically, Oxford and Cambridge universities established in this age. Prior to that, the ages are called the Black Ages or Dark Ages, because there were no awareness. But medieval age is the time when the awareness started. So Oxford and Cambridge University established at this time. Books were very expensive, because the books were only handwritten books were available at that time in the early medieval time. But in the late medieval time, William Caxton invented the printing machine, printing press in 1476. So the important events of this age are first of all, the most important event is basically the 100 Years' War from 1337 to 1453. This is basically the war which was between French and England, and various characters, various writers basically took part in this war. And after that, another important event is basically the Black Death. Black Death is basically the name of the plague which came into England in 1348 and brought a lot of destruction and devastation for the England. There were two rulers, Edward III and Richard II. And there was also another important event is Peasants' Revolt, which started in 1386. And this was the time of the decline of feudalism, and the labor class was gaining power at this time, because awareness was increasing at that time. So let's talk about the important poets and the writers of Middle English literature or the medieval literature. As I already told you, there was the division, the Anglo-Norman period, the Geoffrey Chaucer age, and the Baron period. And these are basically the important characters, important writers who basically produced important literature of this age. First of all, Geoffrey Chaucer and William Langland, John Wycliffe, and then John Gower and Sir Thomas Malory. Basically, Geoffrey Chaucer, the age of Chaucer starts from 1340 to 1400. Rest of the three basically writers, literary figures, are the contemporary of Geoffrey Chaucer. Let's talk about these literary figures one by one and their important literary work. First of all, we will talk about the Geoffrey Chaucer. He is the major poet of England in the late Middle Ages. He has been called the father of English poetry, and he has been called the father of English literature too. So Chaucer served in the court and the army and went abroad on diplomatic missions. He is known as the father of English poetry. At the age of 17, he became Countess of Ulster in the royal court. And after that, he joined the English army. He took part in the Hundred-Year War, which was between French and England. And during the war, he was captured by the French people in 1360. And the king of that time, Edward III, paid a heavy amount for him and then get him released. So later he became member of royal court. He got married with Philippa in 1366. He worked for 10 years in Edward III court. We can basically divide his work into three periods. First of all, the French period, an Italian period, and then the English period. When we talk about the French period, basically, as I already told you, that in the early Middle Ages, in the early medieval time, when there was the Norman conquest, there was basically the French language. So he also had the influence of French language, and he also wrote in French language. His famous work of this period is basically the Roman de la Rose. He also wrote the Book of Duchess in 1369. And the second period of his literary work is basically Italian period. He visited Italy, and then he got exposure to other writers of Italian writer. He got influence from Dante and Petrarch, and then he wrote Italian work. His most famous Italian works are basically The House of Fame, The Parliament of Fowls, The Legend of Good Famine. His third period is basically the English period, which we can say is basically the start of the modern or Renaissance time, which is basically the start of the English history or the English literature. The third and the last best period is basically contains the English work which has been written in Middle English. So Canterbury Tales is written in Middle English, and this is considered his most important work. Let's talk about the Canterbury Tales. Chaucer also offers much insight into medieval social attitudes to love, marriage, and religion. The linguistic importance of Chaucer is that he established the dialect of London, South East Midlands as the input form for the standard in the late Middle English period. Later modifications of this language took place with the introduction of printing press by William Caxton in the 15th century. When we talk about specifically about the Canterbury Tales, so let me tell you, it was the most important works of Geoffrey Chaucer. The Canterbury Tales is an unfinished work of approximately 7,000 lines. It tells the story of a group of pilgrims traveling from London to Canterbury to the grave of Saint Becket. They pass the time of day by telling each other stories. There are more than 20 stories in the Canterbury Tales, and in the stories we get to know the pilgrims themselves. Basically, in the stories there are different characters who are telling the stories. So through the depiction of the story, he is basically depicting the society of that time. So the travelers, like the merchant, the lawyer, the cook, the sailor, are the ordinary man. So but each one of them can be recognized as a real person with his or her own character. So Chaucer has described them as if they are right in front of us. That's why his characterization is admired a lot. And he depicted the true culture. He depicted all aspects of the people. There was wife of Bath, there were doctor, there were merchant, different type of characters were presented. The real picture of different characters of the society has been depicted in this work by the Geoffrey Chaucer. That's why it is called the most important work, and due to this work it has been called that Chaucer is the father of English poetry, and he is the father of English literature, because he basically started writing properly in Middle English. His other important works are Troilus and Cressida and the Legend of Kid Women. Along with the Chaucer, the other important literary figure is William Langland. He is the contemporary of Chaucer. He born in 1330s and died in 1386 or 14th century. There are different point of view given by the different historians. The most important work of William Langland in Middle English, which is basically alliterative poetry, is Piers Plowman. It has been written by William Langland. It is an allegorical work with a complex variety of religious themes. And in this work, in Piers Plowman, he has basically depicted the vivid suffering of peasants. Basically, the symbol of Christ, who was hardworking and sincere, was depicted in the Piers Plowman. So William Langland was basically the contemporary of Geoffrey Chaucer. And other contemporary is basically John Wycliffe. So he born in 1320s and he died in 1384. He is a prose writer, and he started the first translation of the Bible into English language, and he is considered the main precursor of the Protestant Reformation. That's why he is also called the Morning Star of Reformation. He took part in the Lowland movement also. Sir Thomas Malory is another important literary figure of the late medieval age. Sir Thomas Malory, basically he was an English writer whose identity remains uncertain but whose name is famous as that of the author. He was the author of Le Morte d'Arthur, the first prose account in English of the rise and fall of the legendary King Arthur and the Fellowship of the Round Table. So he was the important literary figure of the late medieval time, and his famous work was Le Morte d'Arthur. So it was all about the important literary figures and their work. Let's talk about some important type of literature, or in other sense genres, which were famous at that time along with the poetry. So allegory is one of the important genre which was famous at that time. It is basically a story in which the characters and events are symbols that stand for ideas about human life or for a political or historical situation. One of the best known examples is Plato's allegory of the cave. So an allegory is a type of story that can be interpreted to reveal hidden meaning, typically a moral or political work. Pilgrim's Progress is also an allegory. So these are the types of Middle English dramas which were popular at that time. They were basically the three types along with the allegory. These are the three types of dramas which were popular: mystery and miracle plays, morality plays, and interludes. Let's talk about these types of plays one by one. Basically, mystery or miracle plays are a type of religious plays in the Middle Ages based on a story from Bible, such as the creation of the world or the birth of Jesus Christ. So these plays were presented in Latin by churchmen on church premises. Another type of drama which were popular at that time were the basically morality plays. Morality play is an allegorical drama popular in Europe, especially during the 15th and 16th centuries, in which the characters personify moral qualities such as charity, good deeds, or vice, or abstractions as beauty, death, or youth, and in which moral lessons are taught. So moral plays, as the name indicates and name implies, basically were used to depict the morality and to teach the moral values to the people. So all morality plays, the one that is considered the greatest and that is still performed is basically Everyman. Everyman is basically a play that is probably the finest and best known of the morality plays of the Middle Ages that have come down to us now. So it is a translation from the Dutch, made probably toward the end of the 15th century. After that, interludes were also famous at that time. Basically, an interlude was a short and witty parts in the morality plays in between the acts. They were intended to relax the people and entertain them. John Heywood, one of the most famous interlude writers. So interlude in theatre is basically early form of English dramatic entertainment, sometimes considered to be the transition between medieval morality plays and Tudor dramas. Although most interludes were sketches of a non-religious nature, some plays were called interludes that are today classed as morality plays. These were basically used within the drama as a pause, just to give and entertain the people with the morality too. So it was all about the type which were popular at that time. So dear students, in today's class we have discussed the medieval literature, the age, how the age started, what is the classification of this age, what are the important literary figures and the important literary work of this age. These all are the points which we have discussed in today's class. In case of any confusion, you can discuss with me in the class. So I hope all the points are clear to all of you here. I have given some filling the blanks and along with some questions just to give an idea that which type of questions can be asked. And I'll suggest you one thing, that you need to buy a book of History of English Literature by B.R. Mullick. So I'll share with all of you in the WhatsApp group the complete name of the writer and the book. You need to buy this book and you need to start reading all these ages of English literature from that particular book to make your concept further clear, because reading in literature is very important. So dear students, here I'll wind up the session. So I stay at home, keep yourself safe and your family safe too. So take care. Allah Hafiz.